we're delighted to welcome you to this webinar on the Food System Countdown Initiative. My name is Jose Rosero Moncayo. I am the Chief Statistician of the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations and one of the 4 co-chairs of the Food System Countdown Initiative to 2030. Today I'm joined by the 3 other Countdown co-chairs, Dr. Lawrence Haddad, Dr. Mario Herrera, and Dr. Jessica Fangso, as well as Countdown collaborators Dr. Rosalind Riemans and Dr. Rebecca McLaren, and our partners from Nigeria, Mr. Nuhu Adamu Kilishi from Zambia, Mr. Victor Mbuwae, and from the Netherlands, Mr. Marcel Beukekom. The objective of this conversation is to introduce everyone to the Food System Countdown Initiative, which emerged in 2021 from the UN Food System Summit and the Conference of Parties as an interdisciplinary collaboration of over 50 food system scientists. The rationale for initiating the countdown was that food system transformation is urgent, requiring rigorous scientific-based monitoring to guide public and private decisions and support those who hold decision makers to account. Such monitoring can help align decision makers around key priorities, incentivize action, hold stakeholders accountable, sustain commitment by demonstrating progress, and enable course action. So let me welcome you to this webinar. We have an interesting agenda for today. To begin with, and although we have been around since 2020 as an initiative, we still consider ourselves to be somewhat new. So in this webinar, we will start by introducing the initiative to you, and in particular to participants that are for the very first time in our webinars. But without doubt, the highlight of the day is the presentation of the 2024 report published in January 2025 in Nature Foods, which not only does the first real tracking of global progress of food system transformation after the publication of the baseline done last year, but also explores the topics of interactions that exist across indicators and dimensions of food systems. It is well acknowledged that in such a system, different elements interact and synergies and trade-offs are expected. Therefore, this report presents our first analysis on how the different indicators interact and what does this imply in terms of guiding policies. Now, even if having data about the state and progress of food system is important and an objective in its own right, is not the end of the process. The data needs to be used to inform the transformation. As an initiative, we have constructed public goods to facilitate the access of users to the data and its use. For this reason, this webinar will showcase the Food System Dashboard, which is a repository of all the data for the 50 indicators we monitor in more than 180 countries around the world. At the same time, we'll present reflections on how the dashboard and the countdown can help guide policy decisions using the perspective and experiences of country partners such as Nigeria and Zambia, and also how it can help to guide actions at international level and promote collaborations. So everybody is encouraged to post during this webinar any questions on the Q&A box, and we will answer them there and also in a discussion later in the session. Some of you are joining late in your time zone. I have to remind you that the session is being recorded, so feel free if you need to leave early to leave a question or comment in the Q&A function. Having said that, now let me introduce you to Dr. Lawrence Haddad, Executive Director of GAIN and Countdown Co-Chair, that will moderate the different sessions of this webinar. Lawrence, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you, Jose. Hope you can hear me. Hope you can see me. Thank you, Jose. Great to have you with us, especially as you're on the road. We really appreciate you being with us. Welcome, everyone. It's great to have you here. We've got a really packed agenda for you today, but it's an exciting packed agenda as opposed to a boring packed agenda. And we will try and get you 10 minutes of Q&A at the end. So we'll have Mario Herrera tell us a bit about the background. We'll have some of the key analysis from the 2024 report from Rosalind Riemans. We'll have a bit of background on the food system dashboard, which is the repository that houses the countdown. We'll have a little bit of a walkthrough by Rebecca McLaren on how to use the countdown data on the website, on the food system dashboard website. Then we'll have a key session, which is the three partners from Zambia, from Nigeria, and from the Netherlands, because let's not forget, the countdown is not just for African, Asian, and Latin American countries, it's for all countries. All countries have food system challenges, and all countries can learn from each other. So without further ado, let me introduce Dr. Mario Herrero. Mario is going to give us background on the initiative. He's a professor of sustainable food systems and global change in the Department of Global Development at Cornell University. His research focuses on increasing the sustainability of food systems for the benefits of humans and ecosystems. He works in the area of sustainable intensification of agriculture, climate mitigation and adaptation, livestock systems, healthy and sustainable diets, sustainable metrics, and the true cost of food. And his main job, of course, is as GAIN board member. Mario, over to you.
Thanks. Thanks a lot, Lawrence. Thanks for the kind introduction. And it is a real pleasure to be here talking to you about the Food Systems Countdown Initiative. I'll just take you a little bit through how it started and what have we done in terms of setting it up and some of the initial analysis that we did. So next slide, please. So the Food Systems Countdown Initiative, as Jose said, came from the UN Food Systems Summit process that really catalyzed a lot of countries to work on the concept of food systems. And one of the key things that the UN Food Systems Summit did was to develop pathways of food systems transformation. So far, 127 countries have developed these pathways. And as you can see from the statistics here, well, many have started with the implementation, others have actually really started to tie this with their national strategy, and some of them are funding them. Now, it's fantastic to have a pathway, but you really need to monitor progress. And the reason why we did the countdown was to help the countries monitor progress and really monitor progress on the way they were implementing this pathway. Obviously, it's at the food systems level, so we really needed a lot of indicators covering all the way from food production all the way to consumption. Next slide, please. So, yes, we could have used start with an SDG framework, but it's really insufficient because there's not enough indicators that are really targeted towards the food system. And we really need indicators also that people feel comfortable with, that come from data that they trust, and that come from data that they know how it's being collected, and so on. So this multi-sectoral framework is the Food Systems Countdown Initiative. Next slide, please. So you can see here that when the task was, let's get a group of people together to develop this set of indicators. The key thing here is that it's not only nutritionists, it's not only agronomists. It's a plethora of disciplines that we really needed from everyone to really be able to tackle the complexity of the food system. So we had people working on governance and governance, nutrition, livelihoods, etc. It was truly fantastic, and I think that we all learned a lot from each other in the process. Next slide, please. So just to give you an idea of the timeline, what we are presenting here is the 2024 report. So you could say that we are almost halfway. Next year, you will see a country level performance assessment that is also becoming a very, very interesting study. But we plan publications each year on different topics until we actually complete in 2030 a synthesis paper. By then, we hope that we would have interacted with the governments, with a range of stakeholders like yourselves, which I now count 325 people in this work. And yes, next slide, please. Yeah. And just to give you an idea of the indicator framework, well, it covers 5 domains, okay? Five themes. From governance, which is really essential for strategic vision and strategic planning, for implementation and accountability, all the way covering diets, nutrition and health, environment, natural resources and production, livelihoods, poverty and equity, and resilience. With all these indicators, we can actually deal with most of the issues being dealt with in food systems in different countries, because there's no one country that is similar to another. You know, all of them have very, very different constraints in their food systems. Next slide, please. And this is an important slide because it was, you know, it's not that we just came with the indicators off the cuff. This was a very, very rigorous process to select them. And we started, first of all, it's 57 scientists in the FSCI collaboration. And we've done consultations and workshops with over 550 people, 550 people. So this started with the identification of a range of indicators. Initially, we considered 245 indicators. And then we started a screening and selection process. The screening was based on feasibility, coverage, and a transparent methodology. And we ended up excluding 145 from here. And then once we had those 145 indicators, we went through a consultation with people. Yeah, just to see how relevant they found them, how high quality they were, and so on. So we ended up ultimately after the stakeholder consultations with 60 indicators. And after additional recommendations from experts, we ended up with 50 indicators, which is what we have at the moment. Next slide, please. And this is just an example of what we have. This is a graph from the paper by Kate Schneider. This is from the first paper. And here we have countries grouped by income level, low income, lower middle income, upper middle income. These are all the indicators that you have. And one thing to notice here is that there's no one performing at the levels that are required. You know, all the indicators fluctuate. You know, some might be high for some groups of countries or individual countries, others might be low, and so on. And you know, it's an important takeaway, you know, because we have all this data, remember, at the country level. So we can actually help tailor-make the solutions for a food systems transformation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mario. That was great. Great context, great story about how we got from a very big set to a very small set in an inclusive and scientific way. Now we get the main lessons from the 2024 report. Remember, the 23 report was about the baseline, the 24 report is about the interactions, and the 25 report will be on performance benchmarks. So now we're going to talk about the 2024 report and Dr. Rosaline Riemans is going to lead us on this. She is a bioengineer and researcher with the Multifunctional Landscapes team of the Alliance of Biodiversity International and CIAT. Her research focuses on biodiversity and food systems for healthier diets, better livelihoods, and environmental sustainability. Her approach is cross-sectional and has contributed to public and private sector in-field applications, policies, and cross-disciplinary publications. Ro, over to you.
Great, thanks so much. And really a pleasure to be here and discuss with you all some of the main insights from our 2024 analysis, which were published, if you go to the next slide, in the Nature Food paper, and a complementary report that goes into some more detailed and kind of policy analysis related to that. They are both open access, so you can easily access them through the website of the Countdown Initiative. Now, what did we do in this analysis? If you go to the next slide, we did two main things, basically. One is we looked at global food system trends, analyzing data for which we had trend data from 2000 up to 2022. And we looked at how they changed over time, what are some global patterns as well as what are regional and country patterns. And here, these are the results at the global level, where we pick up global patterns that shows that 20 out of the 42 indicators are moving in a desirable direction. So there's some positive change happening upon which we can build and further accelerate. Now, examples of that are conservation of genetic resources of animals as well as plants, people who cannot afford healthy diets, and also access to information. Now, there are also 7 indicators that really are trending in an undesirable direction. For example, the population that experience food insecurity, rural unemployment, and pesticide use. And there is a large bunch of indicators where there is no change happening, which is also undesirable as we are calling for food systems transformation. Now, this is a kind of a global picture. You can then really delve into the next slide. You can delve into regional trends, and you can also further explore country trends. Now, when you look at these regional trends, you can see that for some indicators, similar trends across regions can be observed. Like, for example, the increase in the cost of a healthy diet related to global inflation, the mobile phone subscriptions, for example. And then you can ask the question, what are some of these global drivers that cause these kind of similar trends across regions? Then for other indicators, you can see differences in trends and pick up these differences and ask questions around that. For example, food insecurity, which is going up in some areas while it's going down in others. Food yield as well as food availability, pesticide use, and this can then also provide opportunities to collaboratively learn between regions of what has helped to move this indicator in this region in a desirable direction, and can we learn lessons from that? Of course, every region is different, but to kind of it can trigger questions to collaboratively learn from differences between regions. And if we move then to the next slide, so that's on the regional trends, then you can also look at thematic trends. And this is maybe a very dense slide, but like Mario showed, we have these different themes within the Countdown that link to different outcomes and dimensions of the food system. And while grouping them then together per theme, you can see nuances within themes, with some indicators moving in desirable directions, others not. And also this again triggers changes. I mean, some people were asking us, so what is actually happening with resilience in a food system? And then you can tell a more nuanced stories, and building on some of the indicators that are moving in the desirable direction, while some are, and focusing also on the ones that are not moving in the desirable direction or not changing. And this can help prioritize depending of the country, depending of the regional setting, and also building on the progress that is being made in promising directions. Yeah, if we move to the next slide. Now, we asked then, the second thing we asked, with this change that we see happening and with these trends that we can pick up, how do some dimensions influence the others? Because, and this is where really the systems approach come in, and where we how can we navigate interactions between indicators? Because a change in one indicator or a lack of change in one indicator can have direct or indirect impact on other indicators. And learning from the past, we see that often while focusing only on one specific dimension, this can have trade-offs on other dimensions. And to better anticipate and understand these interactions, it's a first step is to further articulate them and putting our knowledge together of how we can learn from the past, but and also from the existing knowledge and data to better understand interactions, better understand and anticipate trade-offs and synergies. And I explore where there may be entry points for having influence on change on different dimensions. So what we did in this report was then also, if you go to the next slide, through an expert elicitation, through an automatic literature search, and then also through a series of country case studies, we explored these interactions. And why did we use this approach? Is because on one hand, the quantitative data has limitations at this point to go very deep into these interactions. But at the other side, we with the food systems approach, it's also really important to combine the quantitative data with the qualitative data and the different knowledge that is out there to help interpret the results and to put the quantitative data also into the context. So with this methodology, we assessed the interactions, and if you move to the next slide, we developed some what maybe looks like terrible kind of complicated figures with these tables. But here, this kind of overview matrix, it gives an overview where some of the key interdependencies are. And the columns show kind of the indicators that have then a direct causal effect on the indicators that are in the column. So the rows show where there are direct causal effects on the columns. Now, this table shows that there are many interdependencies, and picking up some trends is that 1/3 of the interactions occur across teams. And we also pick up here that governance and resilience show the largest numbers of connections to other teams, meaning that there are many interdependencies of how governance and resilience are being built on other indicators, as well as that they can also be dependent on what happens in the system. Now, we explored this a bit further. If we go to the next slide, and through this approach, we are able to pick up highly connected indicators. And these are indicators that are directly connected with many of the other indicators. And it suggests that change in these indicators could have a broad impact on the others, and or also require multiple coordinated actions in order to trigger change. And you can explore these further on the food systems dashboard as well, that Rebecca will show later. Now, how to work with this a bit more practically, if we go to the next slide, you can here then see the ones that are the rows that have many connections across the columns. So rows that are highly connected across the columns show indicators where changes could have broad impact on others. So if there is a change in these indicators, it can be a leverage point to impact many of the others. It is also can be an indication that there can be many synergies and trade-offs of these, but these can be kind of important systemic leverage points that can enable change in many other indicators, or that can block change in some of the indicators if they are not moving in a desirable direction. Then if you look at the columns, there are these columns with many connections across the rows. These suggest indicators that are influenced by many other indicators. And this suggests that really coordinated actions across multiple dimensions are needed to drive change. For example, access to a healthy diet or affordability of a healthy diet. Also, some of the resilience indicators there as well. So these are kind of ways how you can explore these figures and how it can link to work that you are doing and finding leverage points or finding parts that might be blocking the change that you are trying to achieve. So if we move to the next slide, we then also assess the literature of how much, like the volume of literature that is available on some of these interactions and where there are major gaps in there. So here you see quite a lot of literature available around the indicator of the right to food and how it interacts with different food system indicators. While there is a lack of information, for example, around access to information, healthy food, environmental policies, and food safety, and how they interact with other indicators. So this kind of gives an indication where there is available knowledge available and where there are still critical knowledge gaps. If we move to the next slide, then what we further did is taking these interactions and discussing them with in-country food system actors and experts and exploring how relevant these interactions are for achieving the food system pathways and or sustainable food system strategies that were being laid out, and if these interactions have been changing over time. And we did this for 3 countries, Ethiopia, Mexico, and the Netherlands. We will not go into the details for that, but if you go to the next slide, just some highlights from this. One that really came out strongly was that many of these interactions were really indeed considered very important to achieve national transformation goals, particularly in Ethiopia and Mexico, and where these governance interactions, we're saying that this is really important that we take that more into account as we move forward in our food systems pathways. And one example in Mexico was that the health-related food environment policies were really kind of having an increasing influence on diet and nutrition. Now, the Netherlands was a bit a different approach or a bit a different outcome, where some of these interactions were recognized, okay, the government's policies and institutions are in place, but it's kind of other things that are not fully captured by this, like limited political will, some market concentration, are main barriers of change, and these also further would need to be captured. And then we'll go to the next slide. So just to conclude this, I mean, there are many more details in the report, but to highlight that some parts of the food systems are moving in a desirable directions. The interactions illustrate further where there are potential upstream dependencies blocking potential change, also where there are potential leverage points for change. Like, for example, governance and resilience that are identified as having a broad influence across the food system. And that diet and resilience indicators are influenced by many factors, really calling for further coordinated actions across the different dimensions and sectors of food systems. And then there are just the last slide is on during this process also we identified critical data gaps that came across in these discussions on interactions. This is just a snapshot of that, but that will also be useful to discuss this further in the different context that you work on and that we can collaborate with. So with that, thank you very much. Now, pass the word back to Laurence. Thank you.
Thank you, Ro. That was great. I mean, I was looking at the data this morning for a presentation I'm doing later this week, and I think of the 31 indicators for which we have trend data, I think only a third of them were moving in the right direction. The other 2/3 of the 31 were either moving in the wrong direction or there was no change in them. So. And even the ones that were moving in the right direction, we don't know if they're moving fast enough for the transformation that we all want to see. And then on the interactions, there are many interactions. It's really complicated, but we'll never be able to avoid the interactions. So it's really key that we know which ones we can live with and we're willing to accept, and which ones we are not willing to accept. So that's the value in knowing them. Now let me turn over to Professor Jess Fanzo. Jess is a professor of climate and the director of the Food for Humanity Initiative at Columbia University's Climate School in New York City. Prior to going to Columbia, she had professorial positions at Johns Hopkins University. She was also at FAO, WFP, Bioversity International, the Earth Institute, and the Millennium Development Goals Center at the World Agroforestry Center in Kenya, and as well the Doris Duke Charitable Foundation. She's going to talk to us about the food system dashboard. Jess, over to you.
Great. Thank you so much, Lawrence. And thank you all for joining us today. It's nice to see a big turnout in support of evidence and data and science, which still drives a lot of decision-making around the world. I'm going to present just quickly on the dashboard. The dashboard is a really interesting tool. It was actually developed and was born out of the high-level panel of experts on nutrition and food systems that both Lawrence and I served on that report. And it was actually Lawrence who said, gee, it'd be really nice to be able to track food system performance so the world could monitor how they're performing, we could govern them better. And we did that. We started to build out this tool that is easy to use, visually appealing. There's a lot of dashboards out there, but we wanted to make something that anyone could go to and start playing with some of the data and understanding how food systems are being monitored. Next slide. And the initial idea of the dashboard was to do three things, what we called the 3Ds: describe, diagnose, and decide. Describing by looking and viewing data for hundreds of indicators that span across many aspects of food systems, to be able to diagnose them, look at that data, understand how food systems are performing, what is on and off track, and then take decisions, explore the evidence-based actions, using that data to improve diets, nutrition, environment, and livelihoods, all of the important goals that we want food systems to achieve. Next slide. And we mapped out, we have about 300 indicators across this dashboard from 40 sources. And we've organized those indicators across the food system conceptual framework, and you see them in many different designs. This is a very simplified one that we have on the dashboard. But where you can map the indicators is across drivers of food systems change, food supply chains, and that's production, processing, packaging, and distribution and marketing. Food environments, the place where you go to shop or make a choice about the kind of food you're going to buy or order. Individual factors, economic, situational, behavioral. Cross-cutting issues, very similar to the countdown that Mario described on governance and resilience. And then different outcomes of what we hope food systems are accomplishing, from food security all the way to environmental impacts. Next slide. You can go to the dashboard, foodsystemsdashboard.org, and look at the different kinds of information. We have a lot of resources on there. How and why we chose certain indicators. So you can go to the data sources and methods and our criteria. I put that in a Q&A. And more about the dashboard, who's behind it, how have we engaged with policymakers, etc. So just for all of your information, you can do a deep dive into some of the behind the scenes of the dashboard. And next slide. And you can, of course, play with data. It gives you a complete view of food systems by bringing data together from multiple sources. You can look at maps. You can look at rankings. You can look at bar graphs and tables, time trends. We have some interesting diagnostics work where you can see where you as a country are performing across these different metrics, as well as some recommended policy and actions that have been garnered from the peer review literature. So you can play with the dashboard. It's a visual exploration using graphics or looking at diagnostics to create this more holistic dashboard of food. And why am I bringing this in? Well, it's important for us to provide a tool where you can actually look at the countdown information. And I'm going to turn it over to Rebecca. We'll have Lawrence introduce her. But it's not only that the dashboard stays disconnected from the countdown, they're actually linked nicely together, and you can explore all the countdown data on this visual dashboard. Over to you, Lawrence.
Thank you, Jess. We now have a short section from Dr. Rebecca McLaren. Rebecca is a research advisor at GAIN, and she's in the knowledge leadership team. And she's passionate about making food system data more accessible and actionable. And to do that, she leads a lot of our work on the food system dashboard and the food system countdown initiative. Rebecca, over to you.
Thank you so much, Lawrence, and thank you, Jess, for that background information on the dashboard. And now we're going to take a closer look. We'll walk through how you can see the countdown data and analysis on the food systems dashboard. So here we're looking at the dashboard homepage, and you can see the three main areas of the dashboard where you can view the countdown data. And we'll look through each of these. The one farthest to the left with the countdown indicators is our global dashboard view. As Jess mentioned, you can view all of the countdown indicators as maps, graphs, or tables, and we'll take a closer look at that. In the center is the countdown country profiles. So in that view, you can see the 50 countdown indicators, and you can see the comparisons to regional, world, and income group means for each country. And then farthest to the right is the indicator interactions that we've been looking at more in depth here. And this allows you to explore an interactive visualization to see these connections more closely. So first here, we're looking at the global dashboard view. And to the left, you'll see the indicator menu. And this lets you browse or select any of the dashboard's almost 300 indicators or any of the countdown's 50 indicators. And if you're just interested in the countdown indicators, you can filter, as you'll see circled in the menu. You can select the Food Systems Countdown Initiative, and you'll only see the 50 countdown indicators in the menu, as well as there's an SDG indicator filter as well. So here we've selected percent of the population who cannot afford a healthy diet, and we're viewing this in the map view where you can compare values across countries for the whole world. You can select a year from any of the years available. You can view metadata that lets you see a definition of the indicator as well as why it's so important. And you can also see the primary data source and link to the data on that primary source as well. You can download the data for individual indicators or a customized set of indicators, or you can download the entire countdown data set or the whole data set for the dashboard. You can look at the same indicators in the graph or table view. If there are multiple years available, you can select all of the years or a subset so that you can view the time trend, or select 1 year to view as a bar graph. And in these graph visualizations, you can customize them to include the regions or countries of interest. So here we're looking at the mean for South America and a subset of countries from South America. And then in the table view, you can view all the values alphabetically by country or in ascending or descending order by year. Now we're moving over to the countdown country profiles. So you can view these for each country. You see the 50 countdown indicators organized by theme. And here we're looking at the profile for Nigeria. The yellow dot shows the country, here Nigeria, and you can compare, this is showing a regional comparison. So to either the mean from the world or region. Here we're looking at West Africa, but as circled here, you can toggle to an income group comparison as well. And this visualization is similar to the one we looked at in Mario's presentation, where it's standardized. So to the right is more desirable and to the left is less desirable. So you can quickly look for each indicator and see anywhere the yellow dot is farthest to the right, Nigeria or whichever country profile you're looking at would be performing very well, more desirably, and would be a success area. Any indicator where the yellow dot is farthest to the left may be a potential challenge area that deserves more attention. Next, we can look at this interactive visualization that shows you all of the countdown interactions. And so you're seeing in this circle the 50 countdown indicators, and they're grouped by theme. So each color dot shows the theme, and the size of the dot shows the number of connections. So the larger the dot, the more connected the indicator. And we can zoom in here on one of those very connected indicators, food price volatility. And when you select any of these indicators, you see a menu on the left that shows you all of the direct connections with other indicators. And you see these arrows that light up that show you either the blue arrows that are showing all the other indicators that the selected indicator impacts, the light purple indicators showing the other indicators that impact it, and these dark purple arrows that show the mutually affected indicators. So you can explore that to be able to see these interactions more closely. So that shows the main areas of the dashboard where you can see all of the countdown data and analysis. And this was a very quick overview, but we hope you will go to the food systems dashboard and explore these areas in more depth yourself. So thank you very much. I'll pass it back over to Lawrence.
Thank you. Thank you, Rebecca. That was great. We now have our three country perspectives. And these are from policymakers who we hope will be active consumers as well as active generators of these kinds of indicators. So first of all, we have Mr. Nuhu Adamu Kilishi, and he is the Director and Head of Nutrition and Food Safety at the Federal Ministry of Agriculture and Food Security in Nigeria. Over to you, sir. Oh, and let me give a quick bio. He's the current director of the head of Nutrition and Food Safety Department in the Ministry of Ag and Food Security. He's an expert in nutrition and food security with over 30 years of experience. In addition to his degrees, he's attended several courses locally and internationally on these topics and contributed to several policy systems development and around food systems at the national and regional levels. Over to you, Mr. Kilishi. Over to you.
All right, can you hear me?
Good.
Dr. Lawrence.
Hi, good to see you.
Okay, well, good afternoon to those of us in the African country and good morning to others. Thank you, Dr. Lawrence Haddad, who I've met physically in 1 or 2 meetings, and also Dr. Jessica for your explanations. So quick to the contribution I have to make. The dashboard and the countdown data is actually very useful to us as policymakers in Nigeria. And it's going to help us in providing guidance in some key areas as follows. One, in the area of decision making, I can see that from the food systems dashboard and the countdown data, we can use the insights from these two platforms to set priorities, assess the food systems where they are vulnerable, and also to design interventions that will address these issues. So it's really very good for us in decision making. And it will help us in knowing areas to improve and also to kind of benchmark where we're making progress in Nigeria or not. Another important area that this food system dashboard can do for us and the counter initiative is in the area of timely corrections. Like it was stated in the presentation, most of the indicators, only 1/3 are moving in the right direction. 2/3 are moving either negatively or they are not changing. So with information like this, we're able to design policies and strategies that will ensure that we are moving positively. So this is important for us because the data gives us information on how to track our progress. And we're now able to design to solve emerging challenges such as climate change, inflation, food supply, disruptions. This can help us to be able to address this. We have data from the food system dashboard and also from the countdown data. Then another important area that this platform can help us is in aligning our strategies. We have strategies in Nigeria, national strategies that we have developed or we're still developing to address food system issues. So what we'll now do is that we'll now be able to use both the food systems dashboard and the food systems countdown initiative to now align our strategies so that it meets international best practice, and also we're aligning with the SDG goals. So, you know, GAIN has helped us a lot in developing Nigerian food system dashboard, and we have now institutionalized the dashboard in the Federal Ministry of Agriculture and Food Security, where I sit in as the director in charge of nutrition and food safety. So the dashboard now gives us country-specific information related to Nigeria. We can now be able to use it to make interventions towards improving food systems. And then we are now also we can use it also again to look at what is happening at global level so that we're able to make comparisons. Then another important area that this platform can be of use to us is in the area of accountability and transparency. From the government sector and from private sector, if they have access to these two data from the food system dashboard and from the countdown initiatives, we can use it to track commitments. What are the commitments being made by us as government officers or by private sector? Then we'll now be able to see how we're making progress in nutrition, in agriculture, and food security. So it's a good, the two platforms are very good, and it will help us in these areas. So very important, as a way of summary, is that it is good and effective for us to track, assess, and also drive our food systems in such a way that we are leveraging on these indicators, both at national level and global level, and also using our local insights based on available data so that we ensure progress, equitable and more sustainable nutrition and agricultural food systems in Nigeria. Thank you, and over from me.
Thank you, Dr. Kilishi. That was really helpful and really great. I was in Nigeria last year visiting your office.
Exactly.
Visiting your office, and one of the things that made me so happy was that I learned that the government of Nigeria has built in the food system dashboard that it designed, built it into your budget, and there's a budget line for it, and the government is now taking it on as not only is curating it, but is using it to make decisions, as you said, and promoting the transparency and promoting accountability. So well done. And the dashboard that you have will form the basis for the countdown work at the subnational level. The dashboard is a subnational dashboard designed by Nigerian stakeholders who said, these are the indicators we want, not necessarily the global indicators. And that's the way it should be. So thank you, Dr. Kilishi.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
And now let me turn to Dr. Victor Mbumwe. Victor is the Director of Planning, the Planning and Information Department in the Office of the Vice President. He is in Zambia. He is also the National Convener of the Food System Transformation Program in Zambia. And in this role, he is implementing or facilitating the implementation of the vision to end hunger in his country and ensure that every Zambian has food on their table every day that is healthy, safe, and affordable. And this came up in the question and answer. Someone said, well, what about just ending hunger? And my answer was, you can end hunger in lots of different ways. And the way that Dr. Mbumwe and the government of Zambia want to end hunger is to do it in a way that promotes access to healthy, safe, and affordable food. Dr. Mbumwe, over to you. I hope we can hear you. We were having some trouble with your audio earlier in the testing. Are you still with us? Can't hear you. What do you think, colleagues? Shall we move on to our next speaker and then circle back?
Let's do that, Lawrence.
I feel like I'm on a game show where they say, give me a lifeline. I need a lifeline, colleagues.
Yeah, move on. Yeah.
Okay, good. Let's do that. We'll try to get Victor back on the Zoom call. So let me now move to Mr. Marcel Boekenboom. And Marcel is, and remember, Marcel is going to talk about the Dutch. I think he's going to talk about the Dutch food system, because remember, every country has problems with food systems, and no country has a monopoly on the problem, and no country has a monopoly on the solutions. Marcel is the permanent representative of the Netherlands to the Rome-based agencies in agriculture and food. He is a former head of food security in the Dutch Development Ministry, and he's very familiar with the challenges of food system transformation. And under his leadership, a multi-stakeholder platform with public, private, and scientific partners was created, which is now known as the Netherlands Food Partnership. As climate envoy, a position he held for 5 years prior to this position, he witnessed the absence of food systems in the climate domain from close by. Hopefully that's changing, Marcel. And in his current role, he tries to connect those dots, amongst others, as the chair of the True Value of Food Initiative, a coalition that was launched under the UN Food System Summit. And I'm really curious to hear what Marcel thinks of the findings about his own country. Marcel, over to you.
Thank you, Lawrence. And first of all, congratulations for the initiative and the first results. As the report says, interactions among countdown indicators are plentiful, diverse, and complex. And this is definitely the case in the Netherlands. And as Rosaline mentioned, there's a strong role of politics and of industry lobbying against change in my country. Agriculture in the Netherlands has always been highly political, but especially after 2019. That year, the highest court in the Netherlands ruled against government, holding it accountable for implementing legislation to protect nature. And the standoff was, and I think I could say is, between the agricultural sector, especially livestock producers, and nature. And the most important indicator, nitrogen. Overall nitrogen depositions have surpassed legal limits, and other sectors are affected as well, like mobility and construction. But the biggest emitters are livestock farms, though. The political issue is how to change the sector in such a way that it can produce within the boundaries of the ecosystem. We see all available tactics being employed, ranging from blaming the messenger, attacking methodologies and scientific underpinnings, to rating the importance of food production higher than nature, which in itself, you could say, is a legitimate political choice. 2 years ago, the Dutch Minister for Nitrogen and Nature, yes, we had one, came to Rome to speak at the Sustainable Livestock Conference. To an audience of ministers from big meat-producing countries, she spoke about the limits to growth, paraphrasing the Club of Rome and using the Dutch example as a warning for them. She said that even a very efficient and innovative country like the Netherlands can hit the boundaries of its ecosystem, and she reminded her colleagues that this could also happen to them. Of course, this was a story that was not welcomed by this audience. The main narrative was that the world needs more animal protein, that its consumption is part of national culture, and that it contributes to food security. What we needed was a food systems dashboard based on reliable data. And we are in the midst of a period of high political uncertainty in the Netherlands, perhaps like we see in the rest of the world. As we speak, it is very difficult to predict the outcome, but we can nevertheless observe that the analysis of the Food Systems Countdown Initiative is spot on, and also that both the political debate and policy formulation can benefit from clear and measurable indicators. Lawrence, allow me to draw a few lessons from this Dutch example. First, protecting the status quo is easier than creating something new. As any debater will know, to successfully undermine the credibility of your opponent, you only have to attack the validity or credibility of one of the pillars of his argumentation. This method has been well documented by Naomi Oreskes and Eric Conway in their book Merchants of Doubt. They write about the vested interests that have been very successful in preventing tobacco regulation, preventing the prohibition of the use of certain chemicals, or in delaying a transition away from fossil fuels. We can see the same tactics being used by Big Agro. Just this week, after the release of the documentary Common Ground, I'm sure many of the audience have seen it already, the sequel of Kiss the Ground, articles were being published questioning some of the arguments in these documentaries. For non-insiders, these articles seem to be logical and reasonable, at least raising enough doubt for those people sitting on the fence to stay where they are. To me, this is very malicious. It intentionally undercuts the intentions of the makers who want to share positive stories of farmers who want to do the right thing. Documentaries like these are meant to inspire, not to harm anyone, and dismissing them just to protect short-term self-interest of a few against the protection of the global public good is just evil. We should all become very skilled in recognizing these tactics and expose them. Second lesson, the undercurrent is gaining strength. And what I mean by that is that local initiatives are blossoming. The documentary I just mentioned focuses on the United States, but also in my country, despite the political tensions, the number and variety of local initiatives is growing. Just a few examples. Citizens buying farmland to create cooperations or biological farms to sell to the community or to be used by its members. Health institutions or elderly homes, but also government institutions changing to biological or even meatless catering. Supermarkets experimenting with true pricing, and pioneers starting with agroforestry. The list goes on and on. Looking at the numbers, especially in financial figures, perhaps still insignificant, but representing a growing number of people becoming more aware of where their food comes from and how it relates to their own health. A third and final example, the answer to complexity is collaboration. A bottom-up approach, like the one I just described, will lead to incremental change, but it's important to keep an eye on the system itself and to recognize the different roles of all players. Looking at the history of the Netherlands, especially our experience in living with the water in our delta, we often proudly say that multi-stakeholder collaboration is in our DNA. I think that's true. Working in a multilateral setting, I can often observe that other cultures exist as well. Some with a winner-takes-all mentality, saying, your loss is my gain. And although our ability to find consensus for the common good is severely tested at the moment, I'm convinced that we will find a solution that is beneficial to all, one that will survive the test of time, but the process might be messy. And that's another reason why I applaud the Food Systems Countdown Initiative. It provides us with the necessary data to measure our progress. What we measure, we can govern. Let me conclude by saying a few words about the UN Food Systems Summit and its stock-taking moment later this year. Following the examples I just gave, I would like to underscore the importance of this movement. There is value in showcasing positive impact at country or local level, just to illustrate that change is possible. It is important to celebrate successful partnerships. Several of the coalitions connected or even initiated at the UNFSS in 2021 will make an appearance, including the one that you mentioned in the beginning, Lawrence. It's not bad to make mistakes. We can learn from them, and we should not forget that the current system is full of flaws. So a little failure on our way to a more sustainable food system is not our biggest problem. Finally, change is incremental, so don't expect a revolution in Addis Ababa. And be prepared that the Merchants of Doubt will use this fact to dismiss the relevance of the event. With everything that's going on in the world today, it's easy to lose hope. I find comfort in initiatives like these and in the large number of people in this webinar, people that keep on pushing in the right direction. So thank you all for being here today. and let's just keep each other's back. Back to you, Lawrence.
Thank you, Marcel. Really nice, inspirational, and I think, very realistic perspective on a situation that not many of us outside of the Netherlands hear a lot about, really. So thank you for sharing that with us. I don't think, colleagues, we have Victor back. Is that correct? No. Okay. I just wanted to comment, Marcel. I think, I liked your 3 points about individual versus collective interests. We must always try to make decisions that work for the greater good. I liked the point about the fight back in terms of local communities, and your reminder that big things start small. And your point about complexity and collaboration. And I think the countdown is a good example of collaboration across multiple domains, multiple geographies, and multiple disciplines. So thank you for that. And I agree. You didn't say this, but one of my sort of takeaway from what your comments were is that in a world that is sort of short on rationality, data is certainly not a cure-all when it comes to promoting rationality, but an absence of data is really a kind of a kill-all for rationality. So we must have access to scientifically generated data, but the job is not done. Then the job is to make sense of it in ways that are true to the data, and not ways that distort the true meaning of the data. So it's the data, the whole data, and nothing but the data, right? So we don't have our third country perspective from Victor Mbumwe. So I think we now go to audience Q&A. There's lots of questions in the Q&A session, but here's a chance for you to ask live questions. So the floor is open. And if there's someone in particular you would like to answer the question, please do say so. And please keep your questions brief and to the point. Thanks. Over to you, colleagues, participants.
Yes.
I think you can just jump in. Who's identifying questions? Alison, Sonia?
Yeah, thanks, Lawrence. This is, we identified already some questions to start with.
Right.
While participants can raise also their hands to ask live questions, but there were many good questions also coming out in the chat that we can discuss a bit further here already. So we will start with the first question that is about local knowledge. And the question is, how do we integrate local communities' knowledge into the indicators, especially under governance and resilience? And here I would like to ask Mario as well as Jess, if you would like to comment on that, or other panelists also feel welcome to talk to it.
Sorry, Rob, which question do you want me to address?
Yeah, so the first question we are taking is kind of, how do we integrate local communities' knowledge into the indicators, especially under governance and resilience? Yeah, I don't know, Mario or Jess, if you want to start addressing this question, and maybe also who would like to comment on it?
I can actually comment. It's a really, really good question. It's not trivial, because we have actually chosen more official sources of data that in many cases do not include indigenous peoples and local indicators. This would be certainly something where we can actually work on. And think also of the FSCI as something that you would use for understanding how the country is performing. But when you go to more local scales, you can actually also integrate additional sources of information to to try to develop your own pathways. So what I'm trying to say is that we're not only limited to the to the dashboard indicators. For a more in-depth analysis, I would actually certainly use more local indicators as favored by particular groups and so on. What we are giving is a platform of some basic indicators to be able to diagnose and actually provide enough information to start on a food systems transformation. But this wouldn't be the only source of information that you would use.
Yeah, great. Thanks a lot, Mario, for commenting on that. Maybe Nuhu also, as you're working on the local dashboard, would you like to speak to that as well, like how local knowledge is being considered in the dashboard there?
Yeah, thank you very much. In fact, I'm happy with the question because here in Nigeria, the Nigerian food systems dashboard, the information we have actually is gotten from the local base. We have we conducted it with 3 states: Kebbi, Bauchi, and Sokoto, and these are areas that are subnationals with local government areas. So it's very important. The question is good because the local insights is usually very good because information from the local communities is what gives us a good idea to populate the data with the food system dashboard, and from there we're able to take decisions and then make meaningful progress in terms of governance. Thank you so much. Over.
Super, thanks very much, Nuhu. Yeah, we'll move to another question, and others feel welcome also to raise your hands if you want to ask a question live. We are very open to that. So a second question is, there's a person who says, I'm curious to know how you address the topic of innovation for food systems transformation. Are there other reliable ways to measure innovation given the major impact scientific and tech innovations have historically had on food systems? I don't know if there is a volunteer from the panelists. I see Jess nodding. Jess, would you like to comment on that one?
I mean, I could say that we're not really measuring one type of technology or one type of intervention across the countdown. And one of the reasons is that these technologies are rolled out and scaled at different levels in different places. So what we try to do across the countdown as well as the dashboard is have a bit of equity across the kind of data that we select and that all countries are represented. It's a limitation, but it's also purposefully an equity decision, because if we were left making decisions around who has the best data on a whole range of technologies and outcomes, we would only have a handful of countries, particularly more wealthy countries likely, who have more data resources. So it is an important question, and there were a few questions in the Q&A around technologies, but it's not something we track, but there's other projects doing that, including one that Mario Herrero, who happens to be the Countdown co-chair, was tracking technologies. I don't know, Mario, if you want to talk about that at all, the Wild Futures project that you worked on with Rosalind.
Yes. Yeah, in terms of innovation, the key that we need to try to do is to try to monitor responsible innovation. In many cases, what we found from the studies that we've done is that there's enormous inequities in the deployment of innovation. So you might end up with rich countries or middle-income countries that can invest in the production of this innovation, becoming highly technified, and in many cases we see it in growth in yields, in growth in a range of the indicators. But by the same token, we really need to see how we deploy this innovation in suitable ways in low income countries, because otherwise we will end up with deserts of innovation versus other countries really advancing quickly. And this requires, political commitment. This will require public funding. This will require, critical investments by the private industry in these new and emerging markets. It's essential that we tackle that. We were monitoring together with the FAO how countries were progressing, and we were trying to develop, progressing in the deployment of innovation. We were trying to identify indicators for doing so. And believe me, the data is very patchy, but if FAO continues with their effort, the Agri-Food Systems Technology and Innovation Outlook, we might end up with a couple of indicators that we could make.
Okay, super. Thanks, Mario. And Jess, Marcel, you have your hand up also, so please go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Just to add on that, and I would like to make a distinction between different types of innovation. I think innovation is not necessarily technological. So I think that it's good to remind ourselves of that. You can innovate in a socio-economic way as well. But I would also like to distinguish between innovating our way forward to solve the problems of the current system and changing the system as a whole. And I think the contribution of the Countdown Initiative and the dashboard is that we also keep an eye on the system as such. And let me illustrate that with the example of the Netherlands that I referred to earlier. We were very good in the Netherlands to innovate especially our livestock sector with very high-tech, sometimes innovations, air washers, different kinds of feed for livestock, things like that reduced emissions and nitrogen emissions as well. But ultimately, we were still bumping into the boundaries of the system. So at some point, a systematic change was necessary. And in the case of livestock, that means you have to make choices in terms of volume. And that is what I try to illustrate with this is that you can only innovate to a certain limit. And at some point, you have to look at the system as a whole. And I think that is the great contribution of this initiative, that we see the interactions between the different indicators and the systemic change as a whole. Thank you.
Yeah, super. Thanks a lot, Marcel. We'll move also to a participant online. Mutanga Mapani, you have your hand up and you can unmute to ask your question. Thank you. If it works, let's see. Mutanga, are you there? Yes, I see you. You can unmute and ask your question. We can't hear you. Okay. I think if we can't hear you, you can try to speak, but we can also type your question in the Q&A and we can take it also in the discussion.
Hello, can you hear me now?
Yes, now we can hear you. Yes, great. Go ahead.
Sorry, yes, it's afternoon where I am and I was driving while listening. So I may have missed out something. I'm just sad that my food convener from Zambia was unable to join. I'm from the National Food and Nutrition Commission and I work very closely with him. I wanted to find out from all these indicators that you've shared and how they interact with each other. Clearly, governance comes out on top as one of the indicators that needs to be paid attention to. Now, from the countries where we have seen success, is there any model of governance for transformation of food systems that is emerging? What is the best model? Because like you pointed out, there's a lot of activities already happening with with food systems. We just want to streamline it into a systems way. So is there a model that we can say, well, if you use this model for governance, it will definitely give you good results? Thank you.
Yeah, thanks very much, Mutanga, for that very interesting, challenging question. Is there anyone from the panelists, maybe Lawrence, Nuhu or Marcel? Lawrence, would you like to start?
Sure. Great question. And I think the answer is there is no single model. I think there are some key principles, however, and the principles are, easy to say, but difficult to achieve. First principle is know your food system, know what your food system and your food systems looks like. So that means assembling the data, know which are the strengths and weaknesses, the opportunities and the threats to your food system. So you know which areas to focus on to strengthen. Understand how aligned all your policies are to the objectives that you want to achieve. Understand how your budget is aligned to the objectives you want to achieve. Are you over-investing in an area that you think is actually not that important, and under-investing in an area you think is really important? And then you need some kind of mechanism that is cross-ministry and preferably cross-stakeholder to help you make those difficult decisions, because they're difficult because food systems provide the opportunity to move multiple objectives forward at the same time, not just hunger and nutrition, but climate, environment, resilience, and jobs. So that opportunity is a strength, but it's also a weakness in the sense that there's going to be a lot of contestation of how to make those decisions. But that contestation, that discussion, that dialogue is absolutely essential to really understand what the priorities are. So countries like countries that we've been working in, some of the countries that GAIN has been partnering with on a day-to-day basis, have set up cross-sectoral decision-making bodies that are much more than simply talking shops. They actually make decisions, and the key there is to keep it nimble, keep it small, and have one person who is accountable to someone in the Prime Minister's office or President's office. It's very similar to the principles behind SUN, Scaling Up Nutrition, for those of you who are in the nutrition world. So I think those are some of the key elements. Of course, the other key element is partnering with governments to build the collective capacity of the government, but also the ecosystem around the government. And that includes international NGOs, because often international NGOs don't have a clue on how to work collectively with other international NGOs in a nice way. Often egos and logos get in the way. Back to you, Ro.
Okay, super. Thanks a lot. Yeah, and this is, of course, a conversation that can continue also after this call. We have different hands coming up also. So I'm calling on Aniette. You have a question also, if you can talk. Yeah. Aniette, can you hear me? Can you? Yeah.
Okay.
Great. Yeah.
Are you hearing me?
Yes, great. We hear you well.
I'm
Thank
so
you.
excited this morning to learn so much about food dashboard and also the countdown, and also to meet people like Lauren, Professor Jessica Fanzo, Professor Mario Herrero, and everyone that is here. I'm so excited. My name is Aniette Philip Ayuen, pursuing Masters of Arts in Climate and Society with major interest in food systems and climate interaction. I think my question is just going to be very brief. It's all about like the challenges that maybe the dashboard might face in the future, or like is already facing. And one of the things is like, how do you document countries that have fragile or broken food system kind of sector? Because we have seen like there are countries like South Sudan that are still missing some part of their like indicators in the food system dashboard. And how are you working with these governments that even don't trust any kind of insight, such as like documenting food insecurity and famine in these areas? So that's something that I would like to maybe know, how famine can also be documented, as you have seen like USAID and like HughesNet, as like the system is no longer working. How do you integrate such things in these kind of great initiatives to make sure that we are really informed and we know which areas are so critical to maybe like salvage the people in the world?
Yeah, thanks very much, Aniet, for also very important question. Nuhu, would you like to take a first step at that? And maybe Mario, you want to comment, or Rebecca, who has been doing a lot of the in-country work as well.
Go, Rebecca.
Yeah, as Ro mentioned, we've been doing some in-country work for the Food Systems Countdown Initiative. So that's really taking it to the next level of taking this work at the global level, these 50 global indicators and analyses, and then working with country governments on how to adapt this in each country context. And so, we've started this work in 9 different countries. We have Nigeria and Zambia are 2 of those. So we had Nuhu and Victor. Unfortunately, Victor had to drop off, but here from those countries. And so, the importance there of working with governments, other stakeholders to find how we can make this relevant and useful in each country context, and how it can be, ultimately incorporated into country monitoring frameworks. So happy, Nuhu, to pass it over if you want to come in there, or Mario.
Yeah, great. If Nuhu, if you can talk maybe about some of the challenges that you foresee for the dashboard in the future, or in difficult contexts, like Aniet also mentioned. Nuhu, are you still there? Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. Just before I even make a comment on the challenge, there was somebody that asked a question on, is the dashboard subnational? Yes, the Nigerian Food Systems dashboard is actually a subnational dashboard, because when we're developing it with the GAIN country manager, Dr. Michael Ojo, who has worked very well with us, with the ministry, we actually got the data at the subnational level and was now collated, described, and diagnosed to what we have. Now, to the challenges, definitely there are challenges as at now and also to come in future that has to do with the food systems dashboard. But I'm impressed, because these are challenges that we need to keep us updated, to keep us active, to keep us alive. So the first one is having the source of data regularly. That's the first challenge. And also, we also have the data analysis and description to make sure that it's actually aligns to, is described, and it goes directly to give us the type of intervention that we need. Because after having the data, after having the dashboard, we need people that can analyze it and translate it for us to actually take interventions that will address the right issue. That's one. Then with respect to diet issue, we have said it, we are working hard to make sure that we take healthy diets, which is very important. So these are issues that we have to address with time. Thank you so much. Over.
Super. Yeah. Thanks very much, Nuhu. Lawrence, would you like to add something to that from the point of fragility? And
well, maybe I'll build that into my final comments, Ro.
Okay. Great. Yeah, no, thanks everyone very much for your questions. You can continue putting them in the chat, and we'll be communicating on them also afterwards. So definitely feel welcome. We don't have time to go about the other answers, but we'll create a way to further capture them and answer them or communicate about them. Thanks very much. Lawrence, over to you.
Well, thank you. I'd like to first of all thank all the speakers. Great presentations under tight timelines, and I think you are very concise and to the point and very clear. So thank you for that. Thank you all the participants for some really fantastic questions. I mean, really hard, difficult questions that are going to give us, some serious thinking to do on some of the topics. So really, thank you very much for that. I mean, my reflections, I got 4 points really. First of all, what we've presented mostly here has been the global work. And I think the global work has been very important, because let's not forget, and until sort of 3 or 4 years ago, there was no food system dashboard. The World Bank didn't have one, FAO didn't have one, WFP, IFAD didn't have one. So there was no food system. There was nothing that pulled all the different data together from different components of the food system and looking at different outcomes in the food system. And that's the dashboard is the basis for the countdown. And that wasn't there. It was surprisingly scattered and surprisingly the data didn't really speak to each other. There were different qualities, different metrics, different units. Sometimes the country definitions, there was a question about country definitions. They were different in the different data sets. So to reconcile all of that and pull that together in a global space was challenging. The discussions around which of the indicators to include. So one of the questions was, there aren't many nutrition indicators in there. Well, there are 13 in that domain, but there are other domains that are also important. So the debates about which indicators and which domain would get the most indicators and what the indicators would be was really powerful. It was a powerful learning opportunity, because those of us, I mean, I'm most knowledgeable about diet quality and sort of the nutrition space. I'm much less knowledgeable about all these other dimensions, about jobs and resilience and climate and environment. But the debate around which of the 50 indicators to include made me have to become more literate in these areas, because I needed to be able to make the case for the indicators that I cared about, not just within the nutrition envelope, but within the entire envelope of the 5. And I think that's been a fantastic learning experience. So the global stuff is important. Having said that, I think the country and subnational stuff is going to be even more important. And I think what you have here is in the countdown work is an initiative that is scalable. And I don't mean scalable up, I mean scalable down to the community level. And it's the pulling together of existing data at subnational levels, the debates about which of the things we really want data on, and are these indicators good enough and easy enough? Do they measure the right things? And then the arguments and the discussions about, well, it should be my indicator is much more important than your indicator. My issue is much more important than your issue. Those discussions are valuable learning opportunities to understand the trade-offs, the connections, and the relative importance for the context that the country or the subnational part of the country or the community finds itself in. So my second point is the countdown process is scalable down to the level it needs to be scalable down. I think that's really, really important. And it forces all of us to learn outside of our comfort zones. And that has to be a good thing. My third point is on fragility. And I think that this is a glaring weakness, not just of the countdown, but of the food system debates, discussions, activity. It's much easier to think about food systems in contexts that are not undergoing some complex emergency or complex humanitarian crisis or prolonged emergency crisis. It's much easier to think about those food systems outside of those contexts, because you think, well, for food systems to work properly, you have to have lots of different things working. But actually, it's the most important in those countries, because if you don't focus on food systems in the countries that are experiencing these complex, prolonged crises, you're just focusing on response to crisis. You're not focusing on prevention of crisis. Now, many of the crises are generated by things outside of the food system, so the food system won't be able to do anything about that. But many of them are generated from things within the food system. And so we really need to focus more on that. And I think we as a countdown and we as a community need to do much better on food systems in fragile contexts. Food systems don't go away because a country is experiencing a prolonged crisis. They're still there. The food systems, they may look different. They may be very idiosyncratic, but we have to focus on them even when it's really tempting to divert all energy and all resources just to dealing with the immediate humanitarian crisis. And I think the final point is that, you know, next year, well, the year we're currently in, we're currently finalizing. So every year we will track the indicators, but we will do pick a different topic so that each of the reports has a tracking of the indicators, but has something else as well. So in 2024, it was the interactions. In 2025, it will be the performance benchmarks. We want to see progress in the indicators at the global level and at the country level, even though we don't have them just yet. But we also want to know, you know, how fast are we progressing in relation to how fast do the indicators need to progress to meet certain targets, whether they are SDG targets or World Health Assembly targets or some other target that's out there. We need to know how quickly we're moving and how quickly we need to accelerate change. And that's going to be very controversial and very fun. And again, the debates that are happening at the global level can also be had at the national, subnational, community level. How fast do we need to move in a certain domain to meet a certain target? So colleagues, I've really enjoyed this. I've enjoyed your presentations. I've enjoyed the comments and the questions. Please keep tuned in to the countdown. If you are in a context in which you are interested in working with the initiative to support your own countdown initiative, please reach out to one of us on this call. We will try to be as responsive as we can. Resources are always limited, but we will do our best. Thank you, colleagues, and have a great rest of the day. And go ahead and individually change your food system from where you are. Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
And thanks a lot.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.